Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Be sure to check us out online at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now enjoy this edition of the Midweek Podcast.
You are listening to Where Did the Road Go's Midweek Podcast, and this week we have Joshua Cutchin.
Hello.
Michael Hughes.
Hey there.
And Red Pill Junkie.
Yo.
And we're going to be discussing what got us interested in these subjects and this type of stuff, maybe the experiences that kind of kickstarted our interest in whatever you want to call this. It's really hard to nail down a proper word for the type of stuff we cover on a show like Where Did the Road Go? I mean, you could say paranormal, but not all of it's really paranormal. And you could say Fortean, but it's not all real Fortean. I mean, it covers different grounds. Maybe fringe, I think, works to some degree. Thoughts, guys?
I've been fond of, when people ask me what my book is on, I'm fond of saying non-fictional speculation. So
Nice.
That might be something we could consider.
Huh. It's an interesting way of putting it. Because, I mean, paranormal's, I think, the easiest thing for people to understand, but so much of this, I mean, what is paranormal after all?
Well, and then you run into people who get up in arms about, like, oh no, there are nuts and bolts aliens, and they're not paranormal, they're completely natural. Right. And so
exactly.
yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on your line there, RPJ.
Don't worry. I mean, I just wanted to say that I loathe the term paranormal because it's so inadequate to describe the kind of phenomena that we are interested in, you know.
And not only that, but I mean, just the term paranormal. I mean, anything that happens is normal. It's just that we don't know what it is exactly. Yeah. So we throw that para on there to say like it's outside the norm, but you know that degree of what's outside the norm changes all the time.
Yeah, and it also may imply that it only happens to just a few individuals, you know. The cranks and weirdos are the only ones who get to see the UFOs, according to Stephen Hawking and Neil deGrasse Tyson, you know. But my own personal experience, and I'm sure that it's the same with you guys, has taught me that that's not the case at all, you know. If you manage to speak with a stranger and get comfortable with him, you know, make him trust you, there's a fairly good chance that he might want to share with you one of the things that happened either to him or her personally, or to a member of their family, or someone they know, you know, something strange, you know, something they haven't managed to put in one of those neat mental boxes that we're supposed to keep inside our head, you know, in order to understand our reality, not to get confused, you know, kept everything tidy up, you know, keep working, you know.
I think too that when you start talking about this stuff, I always find myself surprised at how many people there are out there, you know, who really want to share their stories. You know, every time I give a talk on UFOs, inevitably, of course, the people that come to the talk are interested to begin with, but you know, even in, you know, just a social situation where something comes up, you know, a lot of times someone will approach me kind of hesitantly afterward and say, you know, I really can I tell you my story? There's just so many stories out there, but so many people afraid to tell them, or they don't have anyone to share them with.
Yeah. And I think that's changing with different, you know, podcasts and stuff. More and more shows are doing, you know, listener stories and enabling people to, even if anonymously, talk about things that have happened to them.
Yeah, I would agree. I also think that, you know, that's part of what's happened with the internet too. Of course, the problem is that as soon as you read something where the only source is the internet, it's like, well, is this true? You know, and truth to me matters less than it used to in terms of whether or not someone else thinks something is true. What matters to me is whether or not they think it's true. If it's somebody just putting it out there for some creepy pasta clicks and to get likes, then that's what bothers me. But if the person thinks it's true, then the objectivity of the actual encounter matters less and less to me these days.
Yeah, and the irony is that the internet is probably an avenue in which people will tend to open open themselves more to honesty. You know what I mean? I mean, I
Mhm.
know that I have shared with people online things that not even my mother knows about myself. So that's the
True.
irony.
Well, do
Well,
tell.
well, the thing is, you don't have to, be sitting there talking face to face with someone to share something on the internet, and I think that gives you a feeling of security more so than if you're just sitting down and looking at someone and telling them these things.
Yep.
You know, I would disagree with that a little bit. I
Really?
think that for me, when I'm actually sitting talking to someone, this woman came up after one of my UFO talks, and she had this drawing that she made of this thing she saw when she was on an airplane. She looked out the window and there was a classic disc. Like having that conversation with her, I could get a much better feel of someone's character and whether they're
Oh yeah.
whether they're trying to pull the wool over my eyes or something like that. Then this non-mediated, who is this? Is this a dog on the other end of this connection kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I just mean that, like, you can, if you're posting something to the internet, you could sit there, you can think about it, you can go over it. You're not, it's not as personal.
Right. Gotcha.
So it's easier to share personal things when you're not in that personal, vulnerable
Mhm.
situation that you are talking to someone in person.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to put something out on Facebook and click unfollow whenever people start to complain at you versus people actually giving you a hard time in real life. Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly,
Yeah, and
exactly.
there is this stigma, about the things that are shared online that it's somehow downplayed or belittled. That it's maybe a bit unfair. I mean, like, for example, imagine you get to know some strangers or you reacquaint yourself with some friend of yours and he introduces you to his new wife and if you ask her, hey, how do you meet? Oh, well, we met online. Many people will say, oh, like saying, this is not going to last.
um, I have a friend who's very much an atheist, militant, like an atheist materialist type of viewpoint on the world, and he will write volumes online, but he will not have a face to face discussion about it.
Mm.
No
Interesting.
matter how hard I've tried. And part of it is because you bring something up and then he has to go look and see what all the debunkers have said. And then,
Ah,
Right.
Yep.
checking up with the status quo.
Uh,
and it's like, I'm like, well, why don't we sit down and actually talk about this? And he'll be like, no, no, no.
no, let me go. Hold on. I'll come back in 10 minutes after I go to the Skeptical Inquirer, website. Then we'll
Right.
talk about it.
So, I mean, that's another benefit or detraction from being online is that people can do that even if they can't hold their own on, in person, they can do it online because they have the resources.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's a really good point. Everyone becomes an instant expert, if they have a couple minutes to Google something.
Right, exactly.
Hmm.
So why don't we start with you, Michael?
Okay.
Let's get your origin
Oh,
story.
my origin
Where did
story.
you come
Okay.
from?
Well, one night my father and my mother got together. Oh no,
Oh,
maybe not that far back. Let's see. Well, uh, I'm a child of the '70s, so the paranormal. I'll just use that word because it's all I have right at this very second.
And
It's saturated everything.
it was also kind of the word in the 70s to describe this
Yeah.
stuff.
The
hmm
supernatural, I mean, In Search Of was on TV every week. But really, I think, I have to give my father a lot of credit. Even when the first books I remember picking up when I was a kid were like Frank Edwards, Brad Steiger books, Hans Holzer, the original, you know, popular ghost hunter guy, and books about UFOs and things like that. And so he would leave these paperbacks lying around, and by being a voracious reader that I was, I just pick it up. And in my household, we talked about these things.
I
You know,
learned from you.
but it was a normal conversation. My uncle came over for dinner one night playing poker, with my family, and he starts talking about his friend who moved out of his house because it was haunted, and he actually had Hans Holzer come to his house with whatever
Wow.
medium he was working with at the time. And so my uncle, who was pretty hard-nosed, salt of the earth guy, is telling, relating the ghost story that he heard from his friend. This stuff was so terrifying, the guy actually left his house. So this, it was all really, it was just in the air, around me. It was normal, to me, to talk about this stuff, to read about it. And then I didn't find out till kind of later that my dad's interest went back to when he was a kid, and he had a couple experiences. He saw like a face at the foot of his bed, just kind of a disembodied face or head floating at the bottom of his bed when he was wide awake. And he also met some strange character in the park near where he lived in Baltimore, who, apparently this guy could hypnotize people. He could throw his voice, coming out of, make his voice sound like he was coming out of a tree, and all these other things. And when he told me about it, I said, yeah, it sounds kind of weird. It doesn't sound like even like something a good magician could do. So
Yeah.
it makes me wonder if this stuff is generational, if there's a genetic aspect to it, or something like that. But and even as a kid, I learned to hypnotize myself. I learned to hypnotize other people, just by reading books about it. I got into mentalism so I could learn how to fake psychic stuff and impress people with my incredible powers. And but I just was immersed in it. I set up like sensory alteration things in my house. I'd have someone sit in a chair and turn all the lights out and put some weird record on and flash a strobe light in their face while their eyes were closed. It was crazy stuff. But so for whatever reason, I feel like I was born this way. I don't know if you guys are the same, or if it just hit you like, like a Paul on the road to Damascus moment or something like that. I'd really be curious to know, like, were you guys always like mutants like this, like we are now, or did you get an electrical shock or something that did it, or love to hear that. More origin stories, please.
You want to go next, Josh?
Sure. I feel like my moment was sort of a Robert Frost two roads in a wood sort of thing. I grew up as in a very open in terms of just what we were interested in household. My dad was a big lover of film, and is also a big lover of monster films. And, I was all about anything with monsters from the very beginning. And naturally, that sort of just spilled over into, the sort of real world implications, because what would be cooler than real world monsters? So, like a lot of people, Bigfoot was my gateway drug into all of this, because it's something that I think in a lot of ways, and this isn't to berate Sasquatchery as a subject, but I think that it's kind of an easy concept to wrap your mind around. There's a historical precedent for for large hairy hominids, and it just seems like a logical step that there could be some sort of relic population. So Bigfoot was where a lot of my interest stemmed from. And then honestly, I'm kind of comparatively, I'm really sort of a neophyte when it comes to all this. I was in my day job back in 2012, and I was working for the University of Georgia, and it was dying down a lot in terms of what my day-to-day activities, because it was the winter break for Christmas, and I'd always had interest in these subjects. I would tune in from now and then to sort of the pulse of things about alien abduction and and Bigfoot and the Loch Ness monster and things like that. But I really did a lot of that really did really got rekindled in me back in 2012 when I started listening in depth to the Mysterious Universe podcast. Um, and those guys do such a good job. It's a very professional podcast. They're very cheeky. They're a lot of fun to listen to. And I basically in my office at work, I was mainlining these podcasts for hours on end. And from there, it just my whole interest really got rekindled, and it just metastasized until the point where I was listening to 12, 13 podcasts a week on this stuff, um, including Where Did the Road Go? Um, and and then so I'd had a lot of interest, and I obviously had a lot of observations, which is why I ended up writing my first book. And once this subject matter has its claws into you, it's hard to get out. And honestly, at this point, even if I could get out, I didn't. Even if I wanted to get out, I don't know if I could because everybody knows you as the guy who's into UFOs and Bigfoot and stuff like that now. But so that really is sort of my origin story. It was very much a deliberate choice. What's been fascinating to me that I had no idea, and even my folks don't realize this. When I talk to them about it, I had no idea how much of a stigma being interested in these topics could be. I had no idea that there was no judgment of that kind in my family at all. Um, my family, registered Republicans, Christians, completely open to these subjects. But I can talk to my friends who are open to just about anything under the sun, and they think that I'm crazy when I start talking about these sort of things. And and honestly, guys, I don't think I'm that far off the deep end. Jeez. Um, but it's been really interesting to me in the past, I don't know, 2 years to see the look on some people's faces when you tell them that you're interested in these subjects. They just completely, their eyes go dead and they act like you've got an arm growing out of your forehead or something. But you know what? I wouldn't change it for the world because I've met so many. I will say that overall in this community, I have met kinder people than I have in any other community that I've taken a step into. So this has been one of the best decisions I've done in my entire life.
I guess I never really worried about the stigma because I mean I was all besides being into this type of stuff, I'm into metal, which has always had its own stigma.
Mhm.
And I'm a professional wrestling fan, which has also always had its own stigma. So I've always been in that sort of counterculture, sort of liminal, stigma sort of section of the world anyway.
Well, and I'm a professional tuba player, so I should have been used to it anyway. I'm making great career choices. I learned how to play the tuba, and now I'm writing books about UFOs. That's great, great job, Josh.
2 for 2.
Yeah, right.
So what about you, Red Pill?
Ay, güey. Okay, so I already shared a bit of my origin story the first time we spoke together here and Where Did the Road Go?
Or the Castaneda. Yeah.
Yeah, and Mike was wondering whether our mutation was the result of some kind of freak accident, electrical shock. I don't know about that. I nearly died when I was 3 years old, if that counts.
Mm-hmm.
I apparently, and this is something that I really have no recollection. For some reason that maybe you guys can explain to me, I have terrible memory when it comes to my own personal life. But so anyway, when I was 3 years old, I got intoxicated with some kind of chemical that my mom had over the counter, over the kitchen counter to, I don't know, disinfect vegetables or whatever. So apparently, me being a really tall kid for his age, reached for it thinking it was maybe some kind of soft drink or some kind of beverage. And long story short, they had to rush me to the hospital, and I apparently went into coma for a couple of hours, wake up all groggy and covered with tubes. But alas, I can't recall any kind of near-death experiences, visions of a white tunnel, mingling with Jesus or whatever. I do remember some kind of weird dream I had when I was also fairly young. I'm not sure if it was when I was 3 or maybe older. I couldn't have been older than 6, I guess. But the dream is not really that clear. but it's the impression of seeing myself from above.
Mm.
Seeing my little bed and me in the bed from above, from as if I were on the ceiling, and it was late at night, but apparently maybe there was a full moon or there was some kind of light because the room wasn't completely dark. There was some uh, dark bluish, tones which you could make out things. And the reason why I think this dream has remained in my memory is because the way I associate it, the way I have interpreted it all my life is that at that moment I was being held by the hand of God.
Mm.
And like I told you guys, this is something that I have never told to any single member of my family. I've only mentioned it to a couple of people online, so this is probably the first time that it's going to be public. But this is something that I've had is been with me for a long, long time. Is maybe one of the reasons why I would have never become an atheist like Soraya's friend, some kind of cynical who thinks that we are only material robots and after death there is nothing. I've always have, this is not like, I didn't felt uh, some kind of like eternal bliss or whatever, but I felt a reassurance that someone's got my back, and that's something that I keep thinking about, especially when things get tough in life or whatever, and that's something that is always being with me. So I'm not sure if that had something to do with my ulterior interests in the quote unquote paranormal, but well, Soraya wanted us to share personal stories and origin stories, so there you go.
That's a great story.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I can imagine, have just having that sort of, inner knowledge that there is something else, that you are personally connected to. I mean, what an amazing thing for a young person, especially to have that experience.
Yes and no, because on the one hand you have this, uh, but at the same time it's something that you can share with your family, or you can even discuss it openly or bring it about, or even think about it consciously during your daily chores, because you are so absorbed with the innuendos and with the grinding routines of everyday life that
Hmm.
you tend to forget that other aspect. And maybe that's one of the reasons why only a certain kind of people you know get interested in this stuff and actually manage to stay in the field. There
Hmm. Hmm.
That's maybe the reason why only outcasts and outsiders, and let's not think of that as some kind of an insult. Let's say it proudly, that we
Hmm.
are
Hmm.
outsiders of
Hmm.
society, and maybe
Mhm.
that's why we tend to shun away from the things that the mainstream keep telling us that it's
Hmm.
important, that's
Hmm.
the only things that matter in this world.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because the farther along I get into this, the more I find myself sort of shifting sides and just sometimes most of the time sometimes I just want to be the person who says excuse me, but you didn't take into consideration this. Even if it's the point, even if it's the stance that I agreed with last year, I just want to be the person that says, hey, how sure of that are you, just to inject a little bit of doubt in there.
Mm.
Don't turn into
Yeah.
Micah Hanks, man.
Oh, my hmm. I guess I had 2 points of origin into this type of stuff. When I was a kid, I was always interested in science, and to me, things like UFOs, lost civilizations, those belonged in science, and there was no separation for me.
Hmm.
So growing up, I wanted to be an astronomer so I could study UFOs.
Mhm.
And that was kind of, spoiled for me at some point. And I went, oh, you mean, why don't they study that? I mean, they're there. Why are they not studying them, And then I decided, well, I'll be an archaeologist so I can look for lost civilizations. Oh, they don't do that. Okay. So it just kind of, my interest is always there. My parents weren't at all interested in it, but they didn't discourage it in any way. They thought it was fine that I was interested in that stuff. And it wasn't till I started having the Kundalini experiences that I was kind of thrust into it.
Mhm.
Like it was just kind of a passing interest to that point. And then things are happening that I can't explain, and I don't know if I'm losing my mind or anything else. And that kind of led me into the depths of it.
Hmm.
Mm.
Could you
Do
go
you
into
think that?
one of those experiences? I mean, I haven't actually heard them. And I know you said you've talked about them before, but I'd be curious as to what was unfolding as you were going through that experience.
Now
Well,
presenting
the
the 8-part series, Sarah Cat's
Well, in
paranormal
a
experience.
nutshell.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, like the earliest stuff that would happen just after I hit puberty, I would do things like, I used to play trombone,
That's right.
and as I was playing, I'd see smoke coming out of the end of it,
Mm.
and it was plain as day, but I knew it wasn't there because where would it be coming from? And I'd yell to my mom, she'd come in, I'd play, there'd be no smoke, she'd leave, I'd see smoke, and I'd be like, all right, what's wrong with me? Why am I seeing this smoke? Or I'd just start to fall asleep and I'd hear like cans rattling outside my window. And I'd get my mom and she'd go outside. She's like, there's nothing outside. There's no cans. There's no nothing. She'd leave. I'd start to fall asleep. I'd hear cans again. And now I know that these are all symptoms of Kundalini awakening.
Mhm.
But at the time, I'd never heard any, it took me like a decade before I even found out that this thing existed.
No.
So that was where that started, and I mean, I still had an interest in the paranormal, but like I said, it was kind of a side thing. It was just, oh, this is interesting. If there was TV shows like In Search of and stuff, I watched them, but it wasn't like a calling, I guess you could say.
Mm.
Mhm.
But with the Kundalini stuff, it just kept pushing me in that direction, especially once I figured out what it was that was happening to me. Um, but as far as really getting into like some of the UFO stuff, it would have been Strieber.
Mhm.
Someone said you need to read, Communion, and I said okay, and I read it and was just like, whoa, this changes everything.
Mhm.
And right on top of that, I read Jacques Vallée with Dimensions, and was like, okay, now this changes everything again. And the same thing happened when I read Graham Hancock. I had kind of lost interest in the whole lost civilization thing because I felt like there was nothing really new coming up
Mhm.
aside from Shock and oh my god, I forgot his name. With the Sphinx.
Boval.
No, not
Okay.
Bavall. Uh,
Robert Shock?
huh?
Robert Shock?
Robert Schock. And who was the one that actually found it? I went to his damn house and I don't remember his name.
John Anthony West.
Thank you, John.
Ah,
Anthony.
right. Okay.
And I saw the documentary on that, was like, well, that's really interesting. And then nothing really happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I, accidentally came across a Graham Hancock documentary that I was like, wait, what is this? What's this about the pyramids being aligned? And who's this Graham Hancock guy?
Mm.
And actually, the first book I got from him was the one him and Santha did called Heaven's Mirror that hardly ever gets mentioned, but it's a beautiful book.
Mm.
Because I went to a New Age bookshop looking for his stuff, not realizing he was like a bestseller.
Huh.
Because I had never heard of him.
Mhm.
And honestly, if it wasn't for him, I never would even be doing this show because he posted something about being on Coast to Coast, and I was like, well, I don't like talk shows, but
And
kind of like to hear.
and here you are.
Yeah, and I was like, I kind of like to hear Graham, and so I found a station that had it, and I listened. I'm like, I'll just listen to a little bit, and then I listened to the whole thing, and was like, that was awesome. Are there more Graham Hancock interviews out there?
Are there? Yeah.
He posted a torrent with a ton of them, so I downloaded all of those and listened to them, and then found other podcasts, and then started listening to other interviews. And then at a certain point, I just said, I kind of want to do this. But if it wasn't for Graham, none of this would have happened.
Interesting.
Yeah. I want to go back to Red Pill was talking about his experience of being feeling a dream, or whether it was a dream, or whether it was an out of body experience.
Yeah.
I had a sort of a similar but different phenomenon happen to me when I was, I've tried to pinpoint the dates of it. I may have talked about this on the first podcast we did, Soraya, so I'll compress it a lot. But I had this thing. I was hospitalized too. I had issues with my kidneys when I was like about 3, and I developed this invisible playmate. Who has still the creepiest name. It sends shivers when I think about it. His name was Mr. Bigsby. And Mr. Bigsby, yeah, where that came from, I have no idea. Maybe
Yeah, that's some Stephen King stuff right there.
Bill
Yeah,
Bigsby
man.
or something, But I this playmate. I mean, he was my friend. I sort of found him in the hospital, but there was a point when I was a little bit older where he went bad. He was not my friend anymore. He was somebody I was terrified of, and he would manifest. And I have really distinct, for however much water that holds for being at that age, but these distinct visual memories of this him manifesting as a light in my room, like a circle of light. I have this one image that I've never been able to shake ever, my life, where he looked like almost like a cursive letter L made out of light at the end of in my bedroom at the end of a hallway. And but what would happen is I became really terrified of him. He would appear in my room, and it always had something to do with light. And then what started to happen, this I remember very clearly on several instances. Usually it would be in the evening. My parents would be watching TV, in one of those little TVs you had on a cart, you roll it around. And, so I remember the light from the TV being sort of the only light in our living room. And I would start to walk down the hallway towards my bedroom, and I would know that this entity was in my room, and sometimes I would see light, and then I would actually just lie down on the floor and go unconscious for how long I have no idea. And then I remember the feeling of coming out of that, like coming back to consciousness and being so terrified because I had no idea what was happening, what had happened, except for that moment where I'd go down on the floor and then I was gone. And on one particular occasion, I found myself at the bottom of the basement stairs. I had no history of sleepwalking or anything like that. And, that was the most terrifying place in the world to me as a kid, my basement, my half-finished basement, in the pitch black darkness. So, I felt like there was, over the years, people said, "Oh, you're an abductee," and I think I told you before, sir, I don't go down any particular road with what this stuff was, but there was something going on, even if it was, something weird happening in my brain.
And this was after your hospitalization, right?
Yeah, this was when I was a little bit. It's like 6, 7, 8 years
Right.
old where this was happening. So I was a bit older where I could really say, okay, what is this? This is not normal. And especially after I'd come to, I'd stand up and my parents are just 8 feet away watching television, not in the slightest alarmed that their kid had just plopped down, prone, unconscious in the middle of the hallway. So something was happening there, and that's always kind of nagged at me. So that I may have had something similar that kind of pushed me in this direction, as well as just picking up all the books my dad would leave lying around. And just as one last thing is that when I was a little bit older, probably like 10, 11, something like that, and this perplexed the hell out of me until I started reading a lot of the UFO research. Every time I'd go in the bathroom, I would have to look behind the shower curtain and look in the closet and inside the hamper like there's some little elf that's going to pop out, or I mean,
Mm.
what the hell was that? It was I've never been obsessive compulsive about anything, but man, there was just this period of time where I as soon as I'd walk in the bathroom, man, I'd look behind that shower curtain and open the closet door and look in the half. Where does that what does that come from? But I've heard abductees,
Yes.
who saying I have to look in the closet, I have to look, but for some reason for me it was like isolated to the bathroom, So for whatever the hell that's worth,
That's freaky.
yeah.
Yeah, it is. Well, and I know that you know this, but just for anybody listening, the proximity to the hospitalization makes it sound a lot like, a shamanic awakening.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Mm.
Thank you for bringing that up. Is with Red Pill's story too. I mean, a near-death experience is, or a severe illness is like the prime, the prime calling of a shaman. That's where it happens for a lot of them. That's that point of no return.
Yeah, and maybe the reason this is completely speculative, but hey, that's what we do. Maybe the reason um, why Red Pill didn't quite have that same experience is because he sort of brought his hospitalization on himself. If
Yeah.
that makes sense. In other words, maybe since you RPJ ended up like were sort of hospitalized of your own volition, that wasn't part of some sort of plan. Does that make any sense? Does
Oh
that
yeah.
resonate at all?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
It opened him up to something.
Mm.
you
Or
know,
or
I've always toyed with the idea, this personal fantasy that maybe the kid that was Miguel Romero died on that day and some other entity took possession of its body.
of course, Red Pill Junkie.
I realize as we're sitting here talking about this, I don't really remember any paranormal events in my life prior to the whole Kundalini awakening. As interested as I was in that stuff, I always wanted to see a UFO or see this, but I don't remember anything ever happening um, prior to that point. Everything started with that and then went on from there.
Hmm.
I want to ask to Joshua, why do you find the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind so frightening?
Oh man, do we have to talk about this? Because my wife's away this week, and I'm gonna be going to bed tonight. And damn it. Um,
Make sure you check behind the shower curtain.
yeah,
That's
I
all.
know. Thanks, thanks. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. You can stop anytime, guys. Honestly, I think the simplest answer is that my dad, being the movie nut that he was, just showed it to me at a very young age. Like I wasn't very far removed from the age of the son who was abducted. Um,
Ah,
so I think that seeing that child in that situation getting taken away is really sort of uh, made an impact on me. But it's no secret that I have until I really started immersing myself in these subjects, I was terrified of the abduction scenario.
Mhm.
Um, but at the same time, I haven't had enough strange things happen in my life. I don't think that there's any sort of deeper meaning there. I just think that it's horrifying. As I've been fond of saying, I think anything appearing in my bedroom at night is enough to scare me, even if it's the even if it's Mr. Peanut, it's still gonna scare me, no matter
That
how
would be
goofy it is.
terrifying.
Yeah, it would
yeah,
be.
exactly.
Or the Burger King. But yeah, so I think I mean that's what I tell myself to sleep at night. But it's funny you asked me that, and I just got sort of I'm having a cold sweat now. So awesome.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Well, Joshua,
Yep.
Yeah.
didn't you say you had an experience that you wanted to relate?
Yeah, so I've talked most of my things that I've had happen have been just like some pleasant synchronicities, which I've talked about on the show. I talked about some of them when I was on here with Mike Clelland. And I've had a couple of ghost experiences, which we can talk about later if you want to, although again I've talked about those. But there's one thing that I haven't really talked about with anybody. It was during the writing of A Trojan Feast, my book. I had gone to the beach with my parents um, and my wife, and they had gone on the day before, and so we had just the two of us the day at the beach that particular day, and then we were coming the next day. So it was just the two of us. My parents had already gone home, and um, one morning at like I don't know 4:30 a.m. Um, I got a phone call from home on my cell phone. And I woke up and I opened it and I said hello, and I got this weird robotic voice on the other line. And it was the sort of thing where I can't even tell you what it said. It was almost, but it had that sort of internal glossolalia like logic to it, if that makes any sense.
Mm.
It sort of had like a sort of vocabulary sort of logic to it, but it was just this really garbled robotic voice that had come from home. And so I hung up and I called home immediately afterwards, and both of them were asleep. So, it could have been a computer glitch, it could have been a computer malfunction, but I was immediately put in the mind of some of the experiences that John Keel had, and
Yeah.
some of those sort of, when he was, and sort of got me to thinking. I don't think that anybody is, I don't think that there was any sort of cover up to keep the lid on the earth-shattering revelations of a Trojan feast. I don't think that's I don't think that's the case. But part of me wonders is, I mean, psychically, I was so involved in this. I mean, I go to bed and I end up waking up. Whenever I'm writing, I will wake up in the middle of the night at least once a week or twice a week to write down a sentence that I've thought of in my sleep, or an answer, or a different angle. So psychically, I get really involved in these things, and part of me wonders if somehow the phantom phone call wasn't some sort of manifestation of how obsessed I was about getting this book committed to paper.
Do you remember what chapter were you working on at that time?
No idea.
Okay.
No idea. It was probably towards the end of the book, though, so I'm sure it was one of those interpretive chapters, because this was the summer, and I'd wrapped up the book by September, the first draft. So it was probably something along the lines of. It was probably around the point of the sleep paralysis chapter, actually.
Mm.
Ah.
Yeah,
Mm.
but that's something that I haven't really shared with many people, and
No.
it was just odd enough to sort of make me sit back and go, huh.
So the
Yeah,
voice
definitely.
was kind of metallic. Was it male voice or female?
Male.
Okay.
Male. It was. I mean, it's sort of like. I mean, if you were to put. I don't know. If you were to put a speak and spell into a different language, it was sort of like that. I don't
Huh.
know if you remember the old speak and spell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
But it was very much like that. The call log, I checked it the next day. It wasn't that I imagined it. Like the call log still said that I'd received a phone call from my folks' number the next morning. It was strange.
Hmm.
That is weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Either of you ever have any weird phone experiences?
not me.
Nope.
Only one I ever had that I can think of. It seems like there's another one hidden in my brain somewhere.
Hmm.
But a lot of times when I would go down to stay at a friend's house, I would get weird phone calls at home, and my mom could never tell me who they were or why they called, and they would never call when I was here.
That is strange.
And I never, I don't know if it was just somebody who randomly happened to only call when I was. It would be like it was some girl. She wouldn't leave her name. The line was really staticky, and she said she'd call back,
Hmm.
and then there would just be nothing. But it always happened when I stayed at this one friend's house,
Huh.
and I never knew what to make of it.
Hmm.
I'm like, what's calling me at this point?
Hmm.
Yeah. You know,
Because
I
anyone else would
remember
have left their name.
I remember the one weird phone call experience I've had didn't actually happen to me. It happened to Nick Redfern.
Hmm.
Really?
Yeah, it was something that he mentioned in a podcast interview he did some years ago, in which he mentioned that sometimes he received weird clicks while calling someone, as if someone was tapping on his phone. You
Hmm.
know, this kind of things that people like John Keel have also reported. But the
Hmm.
thing
Yeah.
is the thing is that I remember Nick writing about this incident, because writing about when he was being interviewed by this person and mentioning that at that moment there were he experienced those kind of clicks, right? So he mentioned that happening during that podcast interview, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I want to check out that podcast, and for some weird coincidence, I managed to find that podcast in Blog Talk Radio, and apparently it was being broadcast live. Well, not live, but that was the day in which they were broadcasting the that particular interview. So it wasn't something that I, downloaded online and then, played it on my computer at some random time.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason where this got weird for me personally is because I decided to somehow dare the experience into making that weird clicking noise in Nick Redfern's phone happen at exactly 3:33 p.m. in my time, you know? And
Nice.
the reasons because 3:33 had some kind of weird relevance for me is because I've experienced, I think, one or two night paralysis in which I would, wake up couldn't without the ability to move, and then trying to reach for the interrupter in my night lamp and seeing that it was exactly 3:33 a.m. in my night clock, in my
Mm-hmm.
alarm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I thought, okay, let's see if this happens. And what do you know? It
Mm-hmm.
exactly happened at 3:33 p.m. That weird clicking experience in Nick Redfern's podcast interview, which I had already read, and I decided to listen because of it.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there's supposedly I've never found anything really solid on this, but supposedly 3:33 p.m. was the traditional time of Christ's death. Is that correct?
Hmm.
Has anybody else heard this?
Well, what
Because
I
it symbolizes the Trinity, and then 3:33 a.m. being the natural inversion of that is supposedly when all the creepy crawlies come out.
And then there's Whitley Strieber hearing three sets of three knocks in
yeah.
his cabin, and there's also some Masonic symbolism in that too. It's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 333 has also been a number that shows up on me all the time as well.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I don't think it's that uncommon. I think as far as numbers go, I think that's one of the more common ones people will see over and over again for some
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
reason.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well,
Yeah, speaking of that, I don't know if you guys are the same, but there've been periods in my life that are just so jammed with synchronicity that that I could barely believe what's happening. And then one of those periods, I started calling that seeing digital numbers, patterns of numbers. Say I called it time disease because it really felt like I was afflicted. I'd be driving down the road and make a turn, and there, right there is a giant clock that's 11:11 or 12:12, things like
Yeah.
that. And
nice.
Yeah.
it's always hard to sort of you know try to determine, well, how many. I'm always innately skeptical of myself, so I've tried, well, did I just see another class of selective attention, but
Right.
it really seemed like it was just completely out of control. And I'll tell one quick thing that I don't think I've ever told on a podcast because it's so wacky. Okay, for at least a period of probably 3 or 4 years, I was haunted by Sting. Sting of the Police. Okay? See what I mean? That's why I don't talk about this one
Wait,
very often.
it sounds like
And
you're living in a Geico commercial or something.
Wait a minute. Don't you know that Alan Moore created his character John Constantine
Yes,
based specifically on the
Sting.
If he's
I
messing with
only
Sting.
I only learned that in the past year when I started reading more about comics. Yeah, and read like Jeffrey Kripal and Chris Knowles and all, started understanding all the history, the weird history behind a lot of these comics and everything. But what would let me just give you one example of how this would happen, okay? And this, at first I thought I was maybe going a little crazy, but then it's spread to my friends, and it started happening to some of my close friends. Okay, I'd walk out, I'd get in my car, turn on the radio, and it's the Police or Sting. Okay, maybe coincidence. Then we're driving along, and oh, hey, there's a billboard with Sting. Then, well, and then, and I look at my friend and he's like, okay, this is getting a little weird. Then we walk into a grocery store. I'll never forget this. Walk into a grocery store. And as we're walking along, my friend goes, do you hear what's playing? And it was like a Muzak Police song. It was King of Pain or, Every Breath You Take or something like that. And then we're laughing at that, walking along, and there was a magazine on the floor of the grocery store with Sting on the cover, like staring at us.
That's
And
nuts.
this went on for so long and got so out of control. I called it being stung. I'm like, I got stung again. And my friends are, my friend would go, you're not going to believe this, man. It started, it was like like a mass contagion or something. It started spreading to my friends. And, I really was wondering if I should like get in touch with the guy. I'm sure he'd go, oh my God, here's one for the kook file, man, burn this and please get a restraining order. But
Mike, did you
but I
know?
wanted to get in touch with him because I was like, why? Does he have some antenna, this psychic antenna he's shooting out, and for some reason it's, I'm picking up on it. Then I found out he did ayahuasca and he was, into all kinds of, alternative spirituality and stuff. I'm thinking, did he, is for some reason did I? And of course the Police with their album Synchronicity,
Exactly.
so it just was out of it's still, if I ever met the guy, I would have to say, were you doing some kind of weird, ceremonial magic where you're trying to hook up with people in the astral or something? Because you were really messing with me, man.
That's nuts. That's a great story.
I have had similar things happen. None of them are coming to mind before, but I just remember thinking, why this? Why does
Right?
this
Yeah,
keep showing
yeah.
up?
Well,
That's
and at least it was Sting and not like Jethro Tull or something. I mean,
oh, Jethro Tull would have been okay too, but yeah. So that's one I've never talked about. So
that's
I'm
fascinating.
sure a lot of people are going, okay, now we really know this guy has lost it. But
Well,
it
see,
happened.
to me, what I really like about that is that those are actual synchronicities. Like the fact that the magazine was in the middle of the floor is different than like you happening to see Sting, um, in a magazine at the checkout line. It's actually something. Your attention is being brought to it. Too often, I hear stories of people having synchronicities, and it's like I'm a big fan of. I'm a big fan. Well, how about this? I'm a big fan of the Police, and I was stopped at a roadblock, and a song by the Police came on. That's not a synchronicity. You're setting yourself up for that. You're a fan of the
Right,
Police. You've
right.
got your iPod on random. You're already narrowing down the choice of music that's available. So those are actual synchronicities, which is why I like that your stories.
Yeah, that was the other thing that was doing that to me for a long time, and it was so out of control. And this was another thing that was witnessed by so many people. My roommate at the time was The Simpsons. Okay, there was something would happen to me, and I'll give you the best story. I collect Olmec heads, right?
Ooh,
They're
Mm.
by not real Olmec heads.
obviously.
Yeah, I'd have to have an airport hanger. Um, but replicas of the giant Olmec heads by the Mesoamerican Olmec culture. Well, one day I took my Olmec head into work. It was like my first couple days on this new job, and I had the head sitting there, and along with some other weird stuff. And so one of my new coworkers came by, and she looks at it, she goes, "Oh, Mecca," and she starts telling me she studied Mesoamerican, history and things like that. So we had a nice little chat about the Olmecs and the Maya, the Aztecs, that sort of thing. So I went home that day, told my roommate, yeah, this, my coworker knows about Olmec heads. Isn't that cool? So we're watching an episode of The Simpsons, and it's one where Mr. Burns runs over Bart while he's on his skateboard or something. So long story short, Mr. Burns sends The Simpsons a gift to sort of apologize, a giant crate. And so, the family's standing around, they open up the crate, and it's a freaking Olmec head. And my roommate looked at me, his jaw, like hanging to his knees, and I'm like, there it goes again, and Lisa Simpson goes, an Olmec head, and the hair was standing up on the back of my neck, but it happened so many times. I actually have a diary of Simpsons synchronicities. It almost got to the point where I would know that there would be something deeply crazy that would show up in that show. And again, how do you explain that? What I don't know how to explain that. I've looked at all the theories, camera on seriality and synchronicity and all this kind of stuff. I have no clue. It's just it's the craziest thing. And I bet today I could sit down and watch a Simpsons episode, and some guy, they go, "Oh, here's my friend Soraya, Joshua," or something, or Bart would take a red pill, or something. It's so there's so there was Sting in the Simpsons, and this was all sort of roughly in the same period of time, So it like maybe a period of like 4, 5, 6 years, something like that, where this stuff was blowing my mind left and right. Yeah.
Well, and you'll hear a lot of stuff about like Simpsons conspiracies. I feel like, I feel like those guys would probably be really hip to the fact that you were having these things happen to you.
Yeah, or else they had that same, psychic transmitter. They borrowed it from Sting or something, But
Well, maybe you're all tuned into the same wavelength somewhere.
yeah, I don't know, and it always made me wonder, like, was I just somehow really, tuned into a certain frequency or something? I mean, I've struggled to find metaphors to explain these just like, crazed streaks of synchronicity that tie to something, like just that has no real meaning,
Yeah. Usually, I just take it to mean I'm on the right path, that things are locking into place in a way they're supposed to, and that's the universe's way of telling me that.
I think that too. But to me, it almost seems like more like the universe is playing a giant joke on me.
Oh well, yeah.
And it has an element that that tricksterish thing.
Maybe
Like,
Matt Groening is the architect.
Well, I've always said that
it.
the universe. I've always said that the universe has a sense of humor. You can either choose to laugh with it or be the butt of its jokes.
That's a great quote.
Yeah.
Very good. So.
Because that seems to be the way life goes, especially with this type of stuff.
Mhm.
Ridiculous things happen, and you sit there and you go, "What am I supposed to do with that?"
Yeah, I mean, well, look at the classic, UFO stories. The farmer that got I mean, Joshua, this is right up. Sure, it's in your book. That gets pancakes from
Yeah.
these
Oh, yeah.
these little alien guys. Here, have some pancakes. I mean, what the hell? Did you guys stop at the Interstellar IHOP or something on your way?
I mean, it's sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't know if I told this on the air. I know I talked to Red Pill and Joshua about this. I don't remember. We talked for way too long after the interview, and I no longer remember what we talked about on the air and off the air. But one of the things that happened recently to me was I had woken up and I'm laying there in bed for a moment, and suddenly a voice from my doorway goes, "Hey, hey, phone's ringing, ring, ring." Just a normal sounding voice, really excited, and I'm looking at my doorway going, "Yep, there's no one around." Okay.
Ooh.
And I picked up my cell phone, which was on silent, and there was no phone call. And I'm like, all right. And I get up and I go into the other room, and the other phone's on silent too, so nothing wakes me up. And sure enough, the phone had been ringing,
Mm.
but it was just some junk call.
It's like it's cosmic Dadaism is what it is.
Right? Yeah.
It
Seriously.
Nice.
It's like here I am thinking that okay, if the phone's ringing, it must be important for something to simply tell me out of thin air. But no,
No.
it was like junk.
That's a weird one. So what is you Red Pill? You brought up sleep paralysis. How about you two guys? Have you experienced that? I had that's one of my weird stories for later. My sleep paralysis. But what about you two, Soraya, Joshua?
Well, I have experienced it a number of times, but weirdly, what happens with me, my dream world is very intense most of the time.
Hmm.
About 50% of the time, it's very lucid.
Mhm.
Or it's borderline lucid, where I may not necessarily know I'm dreaming, but I can make corrections.
Hmm.
Mm.
Like I'll die in the dream and be like, well, that sucked. Let me go back and not die this time.
nice.
Like playing a video game and
Nice.
just going back to your last save point.
Mm.
Uh, but there have been a few times where I have woken up in the dream and realized I needed to wake up. And in attempting to wake up, I will literally, like I'll feel myself kind of rising through a state of consciousness toward being awake. And sometimes I can almost get to the point where I'm fully awake and something will literally grab me and drag me back down. Like that's what it feels like. It feels like something gets
Hmm.
hold of me and drags me back
Nope.
deep into an
Nope.
unconscious state.
Yeah.
And then I'm stuck there again going, okay, stop it. I need to wake up. And, it's not like something appears to me. I'll just be in another dream and fully lucid again and be like, no, I'm trying to. And sometimes it takes me numerous times. Sometimes it takes me once or twice. And it happens very rarely, but it has happened enough times that when it happens, I'm going, great, this again. I can't wake up.
Mm.
Mm.
Man.
That kind of reminds me of the things that Carlos Castañeda said about trying to wake up, like wake up inside another dream, kind of like
Hmm.
Inception kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
False awakenings, right? I think that's
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Right.
Oh, I've had plenty of those.
No, speaking of which, uh, since Mike brought the subject, or maybe I did, about sleep paralysis. The last time I had sleep paralysis, and this was kind of recurrent for me, apparently they kind of stop after you reach a certain age. But
Hmm.
the last time, which was not so long ago, what was interesting about this is that I realized that I was experiencing sleep paralysis inside a lucid dream.
Ah.
And
Hmm.
the reason that I managed to ascertain this is because I tried to turn on the light in my night lamp and I couldn't. And that is something that is kind of a telltale sign for dreamers or
Uh-huh.
neuronauts that they are inside a dream. So, I mean, that brings this thing into a whole new level.
Yeah.
Mm. That
The
is
times I've
wild.
been the times I've been dragged back down into dream states, a lot of times I'll start out by going, was there something you needed to tell me kind of thing? Like, is there a message here that I missed? Did you drag me back in for a reason? And I don't remember ever getting anything important out of it.
Mm.
Mm.
The only I've experienced, I could probably count on one hand the number of times I've experienced sleep paralysis, but I've been interested in these subjects long enough that I can sort of realize it at the time. I've never had any, knock on wood, never had any never had any entities or any sort of sensed presence in the room, but it's always been like I'm just moving through molasses. But again, every time it's ever
Mhm.
happened to me, I've always been able to be clinical about it and be like, "Oh, this is sleep paralysis. I'm going to take notes." So I'm thankful for that, but so
Uh,
far I think I've avoided the worst of it.
uh,
The I've had also the lucid dream type of thing where I don't realize it's a dream.
Yeah.
Like I'm fully aware, and I think it's really happening. Like a
Yeah.
number of times I've done things where like I'm dreaming that I crashed my car, and I'm thinking, oh, I wish this was a dream, and then I'd wake up and be like, oh, good.
Yes, yes, that's happened to me too.
That sounds almost like Groundhog Day.
Really. Keep wait. Yeah, that's kind of terrifying to think that, you could just keep wait. It's been done, of course, in movies and TV and books and things like that. But to be, where you just keep waking up, from dream after dream after dream. Yeah, that's deeply terrifying to me.
Yeah.
My sleep paralysis. I think I talked about it on our episode, the first episode I did, Soraya.
Yep.
But briefly, I was taking very high doses of melatonin.
And what was a high dose for you?
Oh God, let's see. Well, I think back then they were selling melatonin like 10 milligrams, tablets or capsules or whatever. I think I was taking like 90, which isn't, it's not actually, for sleep. It actually has a paradoxical effect. If you take too much melatonin, a lot of people you can't sleep. So it kind of works against. Which I was taking it because I realized very early on when I was taking it just for sleep that it super amped up my dreams. It made them more vivid, complex. And then I put up this little page on the internet, the early web. It was called Melatonin Dreams, and I started, soliciting. Back then the web was not, quite so enormous, so people would have strange dreams on melatonin, and then they look it up, and they'd find my page. So I did a little study. So I was trying to push the edge and see if taking more would actually, would amplify the dreams even more. And there was a point where I had like a couple of night terrors, where I just wake up like, just completely horrified. But the incident I'm mentioning, I was at a bed and breakfast in West Virginia with my girlfriend at the time, and I think I was taking, a really, really high dose of melatonin. And I had the classic sleep paralysis that night where I woke up and could not move at all. And I knew that there was something absolutely malevolent in the room. I don't think I've ever been that terrified in my life. I thought I was going to die from a heart attack because my heart was beating so fast. It seemed like, it was just going to explode, in my chest. And I knew I couldn't see it, but I knew there was something in the room. It was, if someone walked in my, basement right now where I am, it was that strong of a presence. It was like something was there, and it wanted to kill me. It wanted to not just kill me, but obliterate every trace of me that had ever existed. Just absolute pure terror. Well, the next day I woke up, and my girlfriend looked over. She goes, "What's that on your chest?" And I could see something red on my chest. So I went in the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and it was a handprint, really bright red, as if someone had coated their hand with bright red paint and just slapped it on my chest. And so the first thing I did was oh, I'm getting an echo on my headphones now. It must be that demon.
I think that Mike Leland, also experienced something similar when he went camping.
I have to talk to him about that, because I first, of course, I thought, well, I must have been sleeping on my hands. So I tried to fit either of my hands to the print, and it didn't work. It didn't fit. There was no way I could actually, even if I twisted my hand, make it fit. And then I looked at it a little harder, and I said, oh my God, the hand was a lot larger than mine. The fingers were considerably longer, and it had 6 fingers. It had 5 fingers and a thumb, and I flipped out. And this was before, like, cell phone cameras and stuff. It was like 1996. So I wish that some way I had taken a picture of it. But it was so distinct, and my girlfriend, like, oh, that's weird. She didn't even want to think about what it could be. She just, I'm not going to think about it. But of course, it's all I could think about, six-fingered handprint. So I've always paid careful attention since then to like, the paranormal, the UFO literature and stuff like that. And occasionally there's something about, six fingers, in someone's story or something like that. And I did ask Bud Hopkins the one time I met him if he had ever heard of that before. And he's like, "Oh, sure, yeah, I've heard of that." So who knows? I have no idea. But what it made me wonder is if and since then there's been a lot of people have talked about this, but back then I had never heard anyone talk about it. Are these these things are sort of it's pretty obvious they're caused by stuff going on in our brain, acetylcholine and things like that. But is it also, it's one of those things that's physical, but it has a correlate that is not physical. That was there really something there? Are these malevolent things that people feel? And why do so many people cross culturally feel someone else in the room? Why is there some evil thing? Why is the old hag riding them? Or why is it malevolent? That seems an odd thing for your brain to do. Like I can understand the actual feeling of paralysis because like your mind's waking up, but the part of your brain that keeps your body from flailing about is still
Right.
running the show. But why would that have a correlate of something evil in your vicinity? That's what I've never been able to get a handle on.
Right, and something that I've been uncovering too lately with a lot of my research is why is there always a musty smell, or often a musty smell? Why do people smell something in conjunction with sleep paralysis? Something else that I've been wondering about sleep paralysis is that individuals who wear corrective lenses and they don't wear them to bed will report the entities, the state of their clarity actually matches their eyesight. So in other words, if someone is nearsighted and something's standing in the doorway, it's blurry, and then when it gets closer, it gets clearer. Which to me seems, I have a difficult time believing that my mind would fabricate that.
Right. It would take that into account,
Right.
your vision.
Right.
That's interesting. I've never heard that before. Wow.
Well, I wonder if because you're in kind of this in-between state, you're more open to stuff. And the paralysis part, as you said, I mean, it's part of your brain waking up while the other part doesn't, maybe traps you in that state for longer than you normally would be. And either allows you to see stuff that's normally there or makes you appear to something else that's in that state that can go, hey, what's that? Who's that?
Right.
Because a lot of this stuff happens in in-between states.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Whether it's dusk, dawn, or whatever, I mean, that liminal state has a lot of power to what we call the paranormal.
yeah, and something that Patrick, again, I feel like I bring this up every time we talk, but Patrick Harper talks about in Demonic Reality, and the idea of that's why trolls live under bridges, and that's why and honestly, like I think that in a lot of ways, I think that that's part of the reason that I completely forgot what I was going to say. Sorry. Scratch that. Reverse.
Brain paralysis.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I mean,
So what kind of stuff keeps you interested in this stuff? Like, why are you still researching it? Why don't you go first, Mike?
Oh man. Well, like I said, it's who I am. Like as Joshua said earlier, he can't, even if he was forced to stop his work in this field, he couldn't do it. And I feel the same way. I mean, it's like it's just impossible. It's the thing that endlessly fascinates me. And the deeper I get into it, and the weirder it gets, and the less I actually feel like I understand, the more it's a mystery that keeps it keeps expanding.
Yeah.
Whereas, I think a lot of, if I was into stamp collecting, as heavily as I'm into, this strange material, I think maybe I'd eventually run out of steam, when I've collected as many stamps, as I possibly could. But this subject just gets infinitely deeper the deeper you go into it, and the mystery, the questions just get bigger, the answers get farther away, I think. But it's also it's such interdisciplinary stuff, I feel like when you really go down this particular rabbit hole, you can't help but learn about physics and mythology and uh,
Psychology.
neurochemistry, psychology, astronomy, history. It's just this vast thing that just gets bigger and deeper, and even that I was and it changes. I was a nuts and bolts UFO guy for a long time, and then my own experience of asking for you to see a UFO and then having two of them pop up in the sky. Maybe at that point I'm thinking, well, maybe this is something a little a little deeper than nuts and bolts. So it's a combination for me of trying to understand stuff that's happened to me over the years and just plain interest. I can't think of anything more fascinating than this stuff that happens to us as human beings.
And I think, I mean, part of what you said keeps you interested is kind of what keeps me interested. It's always expanding. It always seems like it's going deeper, but it seems like it's tied into the very nature of what we are and what reality is.
Yes.
Yep.
And it does seem like the farther you get, the answer, because the picture keeps getting bigger and bigger, and you're going, okay, now I know less than I knew before, but I know so much more than I started with. To me too, like when we do this show, as Red Pill said at one point, it's meant to be entertaining. So I hope people are entertained when they're listening. But I'm also hoping that sooner or later that someone will be inspired and make a revelation. Having a conversation that something will just click in somebody, either somebody listening or somebody on the show, and they'll suddenly go, wait a minute. And they'll put pieces together that nobody has ever put together before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you dig deep enough and you ask the right questions, sooner or later it's bound to happen. I don't treat this as just light entertainment. I think we go a lot deeper than other podcasts do. Not all of them, obviously, but I mean, if you listen to, I don't know, if you listen to Coast to Coast takes a very light kind of approach to the subject. You're not going to get George Norrie really drilling down and asking deep questions because it's not the nature of what they're doing. And I'm trying to do the opposite of that. I'm skipping the fluff and saying, okay, we're assuming people listening to this show have some basic knowledge of these subjects. So let's get into the depth of it. Let's see what else is there.
Yep.
And hopefully someday that will, like I said, strike a chord with one of us or with one of my guests or with, just a listener out there who will suddenly make a connection and advance what we know about reality. On top of that, I always want to know what's going on. Mysteries just draw me in.
Yeah. I think we're all, I think that's a great way to put it, that we're into mystery. Yeah, I can't think of anything, I can't imagine living in like a really materialist mindset, where we think, oh, it's just a matter of time, and we'll have the equation, theory of everything, and all the pieces will fall into place, and there'll be no more mystery. Maybe I watched too much Scooby Doo or something as a kid, but a world without mystery, I wouldn't want to be any part of it.
No, I think it's partly what drives us is that problem solving. I mean, some people don't like problem solving.
Well, and yeah, if you're involved in this for an answer, if you're involved in this for the day of disclosure, then I think you're kind of barking up the wrong tree. I mean, hopefully we'll learn something, but I don't think we're ever going to arrive at point B. And for me, the value that I get out of it is finding the little connections between things. That's where I think, obviously, from the sort of things that I look at in my work, I think that's where we'll probably make some headway is on these little connective bits, because so much of it is connected, I think, in some way. Um,
Well, that's what I meant, and I think what Mike meant when we said it gets bigger.
Hmm.
You know, you make those
right,
connections and everything. The picture just keeps getting bigger.
right. I know everything about crop circles. Oh wait, I didn't realize that there were these 5 cases where Bigfoot appeared in crop circles. What does that mean? What does that mean? Yeah, it's totally. And I think at the end of the day, if you were really to hold my feet to the fire on why I'm involved, um, I love the idea that we're slowly chipping away at the materialist paradigm,
Hmm.
and I would this is my way of doing that, and if I can contribute to that, which I think coming to some new enlightened conclusions about consciousness and about what we are as one people. I think that's the most important goal that we as a society have, and I think that even though I'm not directly talking about consciousness studies or something, the things that I talk about sort of help to further chip away at that some. So
Yeah.
that's where it comes that's where it comes for me.
Mm.
And I realize I've always been I'm the one who likes to throw the monkey wrench into things.
Hmm.
Hmm.
You know, I like to play devil's advocate. I like to, I like the stuff that's not mainstream
Yep.
in everything I like. Like I said at the beginning, I like things that are very outside what people are accept in society as being the things you're supposed to like. You know, I don't listen to pop music. I don't listen to classic rock. I listen to really obscure metal for the most part. And and I think part of that is because I like new things all the time. I like different things. I don't want to go along with the herd. I want to explore on my own.
So
Right.
Fortianism is a kind of hipsterism, is what you're saying.
Huh?
We're all hipsters.
No, because hipsters also kind of that's a thing that people do, you know?
Well,
my, my
to me, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say my skinny jeans don't really fit me anymore, unfortunately.
No, to me, and this I'm going to say this in regards to music, but I think it does apply to the stuff that we're interested in. Whenever I meet somebody who listens exclusively to pop music on the radio station, I look at that person the same way that I look at somebody who's like, "Yeah, I eat at McDonald's every day, every meal." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? You know what you're doing
Yeah.
not to your body, but you know what you're doing to your brain." So I think in some ways, like the subjects that I'd like to think, and this is sort of sounding pretentious and putting us up on a pedestal, but I'd like to think that by going away from the mainstream, we're actually exercising our brains and exercising our,
Yes.
our intellect, and even more important than that, pushing our own limits of what we, of our belief systems in a way that is really healthy to us.
I've also found that the things that make it to the mainstream consensus are usually the least interesting, with some
Mhm.
exceptions. But when you look at movies, some of the best movies I've ever seen have been independent films to some degree.
Hmm.
It's not that I don't like some of the big movies that have come out. Some of them have been great, but the majority of them, especially now, are remakes and sequels and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
a lot of times just predictable crap.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Music, the same thing. I mean, when I for the music show, I literally just say we're an underground heavy music underground music show because a lot of the stuff that gets really big is the formulatic stuff. It's the stuff that you know it before you've even heard it.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
They know how to market it. They know, this is what sells. It has to be this structure with this sound, and they just get new bands to kind of do that same thing, and it drives me crazy. Even professional wrestling, the WWE is, the biggest thing going, and for the most part, they're crap, and that's all anyone knows. But when you look at the underground wrestling stuff, whether it be Lucha Underground or Ring of Honor or like New Japan, this stuff's fantastic, and nothing like the WWE. But people don't know it's there because it's not in the mainstream culture.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Sturgeon.
So that's
Sorry, go ahead.
that's the stuff I'm drawn to is the stuff that like what else is out here,
I was going to say Sturgeon's law, right?
Right,
which
yeah.
is
That 90% of everything is crap.
Yeah, pretty
Well, the
much.
first part is 90% of science fiction is crap, but
Oh, right,
90% of,
right,
but
right.
90% of everything is crap, and it's true. Yeah. So we're 10%ers, I guess. You know, we're looking for that weird little tweak, and maybe it's maybe it's it's a love of novelty. You know, I mean,
Yes.
maybe it's something that simple that we don't want to hear the latest auto-tuned pop star that sounds like every other auto-tuned pop star. I hear about a band. Do you know the band Sun, Soraya? It's SUN, then with three little parentheses on the end of it.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
they're
was
like they're like
son of, but
it's Sun, and then it's got the three.
it has
Looks
like
like
an
an
O and then a
amplifier.
bunch of
Yeah,
parentheses. Yeah.
exactly. But these guys, as soon as I read about this in a book called Season of the Witch. It's called How the Occult Saved Rock and Roll, by my friend Peter Bebergal, I think is how his name. But it's all about all the occult stuff that's kind of always percolating underneath blues and rock and roll and all that. But I heard about this band Sun, and they're just deep, dark drone noise rock. And I never thought it was really like a super heavy metal kind of guy. And I heard this, just blew my mind. It's like it's just it's feedback. It's just droning feedback, but so beautiful, so layered and textural. It also helps that they play shows and like cultist robes, with fog flowing out all over. It's so cool, and I'm like, man, so that's the kind of thing I say. I think we're probably all that way. Yeah, and maybe that's the real link here. We're just looking for something different, something new, and just
Yes.
not what we're tired of the normal stuff. Give us the abnormal, give us the deep, the weird, the dark, the creepy,
And with music, I mean, I search high and low for my music shows, looking for those bands that stand out, that are different. And when I hear something that's really different, I'll just stop. I'll be like, "Whoa, what's this?" And sometimes I'll be like, "I don't like it, but it's different, so I'm gonna play it because I don't think I've ever heard
Well,
anything like it
and
before."
that's something that's greatly missing in today's society in general, is people really digging down and living with something that they don't like until they either like it or decide, no, I actually don't like this anyway, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I figure with my doing a radio show though, I figure somebody else might
Yeah,
like
that's
it.
true.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny. I just there was one of the NPR shows. They were talking about how when Stravinsky, when the Rites of Spring first premiered in an opera house in Russia, people rioted. They got it. I mean, it was like they flipped out because this atonal, strange music was so different to them that they actually rioted. They were throwing stuff, fighting. They were going. Stravinsky had to be like hustled out of the place before they tore him to pieces. And then, like about a year later, so he was the toast of the town. Everybody loved this music, but it was so alien to them when they first heard it that it actually drove them, temporarily insane. I
Wow.
mean, that's what something so different can has the power to do.
Yeah.
What a cool anecdote. I mean, imagine playing music, something today that would drive an entire, concert hall to want to tear you to pieces.
So Red Pill Junkie,
Yep.
why are you still interested in this stuff? What drives you to keep
Oh
searching?
God. I don't know, man. I mean, whether we are hardwired to pursue this rabbit hole or not, whether it is our fate, our karma, or some kind of deep cosmological video game we're playing down here, it's something that we probably won't be able to answer in our lifetimes. Maybe, hopefully, all these interests will become good practice for what comes afterwards. You know what I mean? When
Yeah.
the lights go out and we reach the next level of the stage of the video game, and we have to fight against the new mini bosses. But I don't know. I think I think I've said this before, whether in this show or others, that this stuff, and first ufology, because like Joshua with the cryptozoology and Bigfoot, UFOs were my gateway drug. But afterwards, you kind of become tired of it, and you started to look into other stuff. You start to broaden your horizons, and you go from nuts and bolts UFOs to questions about consciousness, and from there to questions about the nature of the universe, the nature of reality, and the true nature of ourselves. And at the end of the day, I think that ufology and the high strangeness became my personal alchemy. How in medieval times, and now the popular cultural conception of alchemy was, these wizard like kind of guys who try to turn lead into gold. But in reality, the true purpose of the great work in alchemy was to transform the alchemist himself, was to transmutate their earthly matter into the divine substance. And I think that in some small, measure, this stuff has done that in my life, has actually helped me become a better person, to grow intellectually, uh, emotionally, and hopefully even spiritually. So, I, in a nutshell, I think that's it.
I think you just nailed it.
Yep.
I really do. I mean, that is the perfect metaphor.
See, and I also went from investigating once the Kundalini stuff started up. It drew me to more of the occult realm of magic and things like that, and away from sort of the UFOs and Bigfoot and things like that, because that seemed to be closer to where I might find answers as to what was going on. So I started researching Crowley and different magicians of the past, and just the concepts of magic, and and like I said, until I came across communion, and when I started getting back into this stuff more heavily with communion and Valet and stuff, I realized that most of these people didn't have that occult background. It seems like a lot of people who research this stuff, which was also kind of to my surprise, have more of a Christian background.
Yeah, well,
And-
I mean, I think I mentioned on a previous show, at one of our panel shows, I was blown away when I read Jeffrey Kripal's, I think it was Authors of the Impossible, where he talks about Valet, and J. Allen Hynek was a Rosicrucian, and gave Valet his collection of books. So if you go into Valet's home, he's got the J. Allen Hynek Rosicrucian book collection, basically. And so these guys, even while they were, ostensibly still, wearing their scientific hats, I mean, to find out that Hynek was, a Rosicrucian, was into Hermeticism and Kabbalah and things like that. I mean, all this stuff intersects, and I agree. I mean, I took the same turn into magic and occultism and all, because I'm like, well, this is one, this is one template we can kind of, use to look at all this stuff. But so, to find out that Valet, has it just blew my mind. I had
not
no
exactly
idea.
the person you'd think. Yeah.
Totally.
Well, the thing too is that because I came into it from that occult viewpoint. When I was reading Strieber's stuff, especially at one point, it dawned on me. I'm like, I've had these experiences, but there were no UFOs involved. And it's like, so what is this stuff really? Because if I'm dealing with the same stuff he's dealing with, but I'm drawing it in using magical rituals, and he's having these UFO experiences, it's probably not either of those things.
Yeah. Well, I've always wondered, and maybe you guys know this, but I know, like before Communion came out, Strieber had done, a lot of Gurdjieff type work
Yeah.
for a while, but he was also into Wicca, and he wrote that Cat Magic book, which was really
Yep.
like so.
Mhm.
So does anyone know if like he was actually doing some sort of magic himself before the stuff in his cabin
I
got
don't think
underway?
so.
Okay.
Because if I remember right, later in his books, he had contact with actual Wiccans,
Hmm.
and it was kind of a new thing for him to connect that at
Okay.
all to the
Okay.
experiences.
Because I thought Cat Magic came out before, before Communion, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it did too.
I'm pretty
Okay.
sure it did. I'm pretty sure
Okay.
most of his fictional stuff was
I
pre.
think
Yeah,
Cat Magic
yeah.
was like one of his first ones,
Okay,
maybe
okay.
even either before or after the Hunger.
Hmm. Well, I don't know if I told you guys, this is one little bit of insight I have to him and that period of time when he was having the visitors is I have a friend who's I probably shouldn't say who he is, but he's a horror author too. And his books were like getting popular around the same time that Strieber's horror books. So they were horror writers and they hung out together. Well, my friend would remembers getting panicked calls from Whitley, like 3 o'clock in the morning. Whitley would call him and say, "I don't know what just happened." This was a long time before he actually wrote Communion. So I have a firsthand witness to the fact that he was really terrified about what was happening. Which
Something really
which
happened to him.
argues against the idea that he that I don't believe anyway, but people would say he made it up or something like
Yeah.
that. No,
Yeah.
he was calling my friend, saying, "I think I'm losing my mind. Something really freaky just happened." And so just one little tidbit on him. I thought I'd throw in
That's
there.
interesting.
That is really
really.
interesting. Yeah, I actually, it's kind of funny that we're talking so much about him because I actually ended up writing a good portion on him today.
Oh wow.
And the conclusion that I came to was that, I don't know if everything that happened to him really happened to him, but I definitely think he thinks it did.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
The problem this is sort of a little insight into book number 2, but the problem that I have run into with some of his stuff, because I'm actually a pretty big Whitley Strieber apologist for the most part. But the problem that I've run into with looking at what I'm looking at with smells in my book right now is that his description of the smells that he encountered constantly changes.
Yes.
And
A few of the things he's described over the years have changed, and I don't know if it's just memory.
well, here's the thing though, is that a one-time exposure to a smell is usually enough to keep the smell ingrained in your memory for
Forever.
the rest of
Yeah.
your life. I mean, every scent psychologist, everyone who studies olfaction and memory will say that your memory is linked more strongly to smell than anything else. So the fact that he kept on
That's true.
reevaluating it makes me it's the first time that I've ever had something that makes me go, is there something else going on here? Now, of course, there are other reasons that he could have conflated or mixed things up, which I go into, but that's the first time when I've actually sat back and gone, maybe this isn't quite as cut and dry as I thought it was.
Huh.
Can
What
you
were
share
the
some examples of where
Yeah.
he's yeah.
Well, it actually happens 3 times in Communion. I mean, the first time he asks deliberately to smell
right?
one of his
Yeah, the
captors.
sleep. Yeah.
Yeah, it smells like cardboard and with overtones of cinnamon on the gray.
Yeah.
And later under hypnosis, he says it smells like cheese. Then later in a description, he says cheese with the sulfurous undertone that they always mention in UFO reports. And
This
then
is the same encounter he's
this
describing.
is the same. Yeah,
Okay.
well, no, this is the same book, he's
Right,
describing the
okay.
same encounter.
Okay.
And then later he says, yes, that burning cardboard smell reminded me of something in my childhood. And I'm like, now it's burning cardboard. But the interesting thing is that he asked to smell his abductor specifically to reinforce the reality of the abductor, and he remembers that as a real memory. And yet under hypnosis he's saying it smells like cheddar cheese. So something is and sort of where I end up coming down on this is that We can't, while we remember smells well, we have difficulty recreating scent pictures.
Hmm.
Some
Right.
people say that they can do that, but generally speaking, psychologists don't think we can do that. So I think that smell might be the least reliable thing retrieved under hypnotic regression. Is sort of where I'm sort of leaning with this. But that it's just an awful lot of contradiction in one book. He does something similar actually, and I brought this up in a Trojan Feast with the some of the food offerings that he received. His first time he received something that he said was tasted like a bitter pomegranate, and then later in transformation he described it as a fig. So and again, taste is one of those things that is basically smell. It's so
Yeah.
closely tied to smell. It interfaces with memory in a lot of the same way. So the fact that those memories, which should be the strongest, change makes me wonder, is there something going on here with screen memories or hypnotic regression or, I don't think it's outright deception. I just think that there's something problematic going on there nonetheless.
Yeah,
I,
or
th-
maybe
I think an editor would have caught that too. That's what's odd.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe that's because was keeping the account as true to honest as he could, and his experience of the smell changed.
Hmm.
All right.
So he did change it in the book. I mean, if it's in the same book, someone would have caught it,
Right.
and he would have had to
Well,
say, no, 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 leave it like
and
that.
and another
Right.
thing is it becomes unclear whether or not, are you smelling the entity? Are you smelling the interior of the craft? Are you smelling the exterior of the craft? Are you
I
smelling the
think that
exhaust of the craft?
yeah,
Are you smelling, so
I remember it's been a while since I've read Communion, but I think that when he mentions smells, yeah, one of the first instance in which he mentions smells is when he asks permission from the visitor to smell his sleeve and his arm. And the second time, and that's like in the first portion of the book, in which is supposedly some kind of, it's not clear to the reader if this is a conscious recall or not. But then, as the story or the book progresses, he goes into regression, and that's when he says that it smells really bad here, like saying how
mhm.
it was so strange to him to think about a supposedly alien spacecraft that you will
Yeah.
think that it's so advanced and so uh, aseptic and and futuristic that there wouldn't be any kind of smells, and
Right.
and that's what caught him off guard. This idea that, well, this it smells really funky. And even though this is probably unrelated, that if you read stories about our own space travel, the work of Soviets and Russians and Americans in space, how space stations tend to smell really bad.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
And lunar soil smells bad too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Talk to the
Huh.
moon. The astronauts that went to the moon, they're like, yeah, it has a smell.
Yeah.
It's
Generally,
not
it's
a
been
pleasant
regarded as
smell.
like this sort of gunpowdery smell, which
Right.
I think that once all is said and done and the dust settles, pardon the pun, on this particular project of mine, I think it's going to become very apparent how pervasive sulfur is to all these phenomena. So,
Yeah.
that's why
Not surprising.
that's why I'm doing this. Is for this
Yeah.
this little conversation is a microcosm on why I thought that this should be written. So,
Yeah, man. Please hurry up and finish it so I can read
thanks.
it.
I'm excited.
isn't there a chapter in Futurama in which Professor Hubert Farms creates some kind, instead of a telescope, in order to
Smelloscope.
see?
That's
Yeah.
yeah, he did.
Yes.
I had completely forgotten about that, but that is fantastic.
They use that in more than one episode, too.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure they do. Yeah.
you should use that for the cover.
Yeah. No, it's. That'll at the very least make a great epigraph.
Oh, and we were talking about music earlier, and you mentioned Suno, but I would recommend, if anyone wanted to hear sort of something shamanic, would be to listen to Fields of the Nephilim's Psychonaut Liber 3,
Mm.
because it was written with very shamanic overtones, like intentionally meant to alter your psyche when you listen to it,
Mhm.
and it tends to work. Anytime I listen to it with headphones on, I feel very energized
Wow.
after hearing
Uh-huh.
it.
Mm.
But what's
It's like it's like
what's the tune called again?
it's called Psychonaut.
By
Fields of the
Fields of the
Nephilim.
Nephilim.
Mhm.
Yeah, Fields of the Nephilim. And it has to be Liber 3. There's a bunch of versions out there, and the short versions don't have the same effect. The good version, Liber 3, is 9 minutes and 13 seconds long. But the vocalist was also into shamanism and altered states of consciousness and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So this played a big part in their lyrical structures and the way he wrote songs and so on and so forth. He actually did some of the cover artwork for some of Andrew Collins' books.
Oh, wow.
So, and Andrew did some stuff for him as well. But it's just, I mean, whenever you get shamanism or shamanistic kind of ideas mixed into music, I love that.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's where it all comes from.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, yeah, I was just listening. I just did a talk on magic mushrooms. I call it the secret history of magic mushrooms. Actually, there's a version of it online if anyone is interested in that subject. If you look for my name and the secret history of magic mushrooms. But I've been listening to there's recordings that Gordon Wasson made, and he's the J.P. Morgan vice president that actually was the first Westerner to, he sought out magic mushrooms when a lot of people thought it was just a myth. And he found Maria Sabina, who
Mhm.
was the curandera in Huatla de Jimenez, Mexico, that turned basically, Timothy Leary may never have come into prominence, if Gordon Wasson hadn't gone and made this profound connection with Maria Sabina. And you can find her chants. I mean, talk about shamanic and, taking you, deep. I mean, it's just this woman chanting, and she would take the mushrooms and do her ceremonies. And during one of them, Wasson, had a tape recorder, so he recorded them. And it's a very, very rare record now. I think it was really difficult to find, but you could find the files online if you like just really, powerful shamanic, real, original. This is this woman, in the 1950s who, had carried on this hidden tradition all these years. It's just powerful stuff. So I
Wow.
encourage, if you like that kind of thing, but it's real simple. It's just her chanting, and she kind of like taps on her chest, and it's real percussive, but it's just
Mm.
her, but so powerful. So sorry to get off on that tangent, but we got into music, and
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
No, I
no.
need to check that out.
yeah, it's amazing stuff, and it's just a voice and just using her whistling. And what's cool about it is it's the religion, the shamanic sort of religion that she was part is a mix of Christian and the beliefs, the ancient beliefs of the people there. So it's
Yeah.
really cool, to hear she's, you can hear the Santos Cristo, things like that. You can hear this syncretic, mixing of the belief systems and all. It's really kind of
Yeah.
fascinating too.
Mhm, mhm.
All right. Well, that seems like a good place to end it for this week. Let's see. Websites, Joshua?
My website is joshuacutchin.com, and I have a book out called A Trojan Feast that you can find on Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Michael?
MichaelMHughes.com. My two books in the Blackwater Lights trilogy. I think Blackwater Lights is on sale for $1 right now. They had a Halloween sale, and for some reason it's still going on. So hey, you can get it. You can get it for 99 cents as an ebook. And I'm hurriedly, desperately trying to finish the third book in the trilogy before my editor kills me. So.
And Red Pill?
Oh God, my fortune writing has reached a state of hiatus, hopefully temporary. Right now, the Daily Grail is where you'll surely find me, either writing the news rips or an occasional article.
All right. And all of you are on Facebook?
Yes, sir.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
All right. And of course, if you want to become a patron of Where Did the Road Go, go to our website. It's very cheap. It's like a subscription to the site, and I'm going to be adding more and more things that you'll be able to get from becoming a patron, and it would help us out expanding the show. So I should usually say these things at the beginning, but I'm really bad at that. So I thank you guys. It's been a wonderful conversation, and we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, man. Let's please do it. I love
Yeah,
it.
my
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah, likewise.